Am I live here? All right, thanks so much for coming, everyone. Jason and I are going to be talking to you this afternoon about Jupyter Lab. The subtitle of the talk is Building Blocks for Interactive Computing. Even though Jason and I are the two giving the talk, there's a lot of other people who've been working on Jupyter Lab. Listed here on this slide are the other people that were sort of active on Jupyter Lab when we submitted the talk. Later, Jason will talk about a lot of the other new people who've joined in recently. We're really excited about this. To give you a sense of how excited we are, this was room 211 downstairs 20 minutes ago. I think there was probably around a dozen pull requests merged in the last hour, which means that Jason, 5 minutes ago, was in the corner doing a big, massive Git rebase on all the latest changes. So where are we today with Project Jupyter? The adoption has been absolutely fantastic. Today, our best guess is somewhere around 3 million users. We did a user survey in 2015. IBM helped out a lot with that. Here's a distribution of the different types of people that are using the Jupyter Notebook. You can see data science is strongly represented, education and science strongly represented. Another metric, as best as we know, or last time we checked, I should say, there are over 500,000 notebooks on GitHub right now. GitHub has started to index content in notebooks, and so, for example, now there's in the GitHub trending pages, you can actually look at trending Jupyter notebooks. So that's one way of sort of tracking what interesting content is being done in Jupyter notebooks. The Jupyter Notebook is enabling reproducible science. This is something that is near and dear to our hearts. So the LIGO collaboration, which recently discovered the first experimental signatures of gravitational waves, has been publishing all of their analysis on this website here, the LIGO Open Science Center, as Jupyter Notebooks. So anyone can download the data with the notebooks, and there's even a live binder service for this, so people can run those notebooks without installing anything. We're also enabling open data journalism. A great example of this is BuzzFeed. I know BuzzFeed is not traditionally known as a serious data journalism outfit. However, they have an absolutely spectacular data journalism team. Here's an article that they wrote recently. And this is a consumer-focused journalism article. And anytime they publish an article like this that has data, they post the data on GitHub and all the analysis as Jupyter Notebooks. The notebook, in quotes, is about more than just notebooks, though. In case you haven't noticed, the latest version of Jupyter, version 4, has a file browser on the upper left there. There's also a text editor, so you can open source code files, .py files, for example, and edit those. There's a full-blown terminal, so you can even run VI from the web browser, and of course, notebooks. The different parts of Jupyter are really building blocks. We think of these as building blocks for interactive computing. So file browsers, notebooks, text editors, widgets, output in the terminal. So what are we hearing from users? And a lot of this comes from this user survey that we did in 2015. Also, though, a lot of it comes from watching how people like yourselves are using the Jupyter Notebook. One thing that came out is that most people surveyed are using the notebook daily, and the next category is weekly. So you're spending a lot of time in the Jupyter Notebook. We heard very strongly that our users love the notebook workflow and user experience. However, what we've also heard is that there are a lot of workflows where the notebook is a little bit painful. As you start to transition from interactive exploratory work to more software engineering, the notebook gets pretty painful. So we've heard things like a strong need for more integration with version control systems, support for better text editors, code editors. The different building blocks that we have right now, you basically can only get one of those building blocks on a web page. For example, you can't have a text editor next to a terminal above a notebook. And also, because you can't have those building blocks on the same page, it's really hard to integrate them. For example, it would be really nice if you could take a notebook cell and just drag and drop it over to a text file and have that content dropped in the text file. And then a lot of the type of tools that show up in the more software engineering workflows like debuggers, profilers, and variable inspectors. Today, we're really excited to show you the first preview. This is a very early release, or it's not even a release yet, a preview of JupyterLab. So what is JupyterLab? JupyterLab is the natural evolution of the Jupyter Notebook user interface. People are asking us, is this an IDE? And our answer is yes, if by IDE you mean an interactive development environment. It's a flexible user interface that allows users to combine these different building blocks in ways that support the workflows that you happen to have at the moment, whether that's more the interactive exploratory workflow or something that looks more like DevOps or software engineering. We have a modernized JavaScript architecture underneath this. It's built using Phosphor.js, which is a open source library for building web applications that have a lot of the capabilities of desktop applications. And we're really taking a very design-driven development process. So we have a number of designers working with us on this project. We're taking user testing very seriously. A number of you have participated in the user testing here in person, and we really appreciate that. The response has been fantastic. We had over 100 people sign up or request to participate in the user testing. We weren't able to include everyone. That would have taken, I guess, well, many more hours than we had to do at the conference. So our roadmap. Today, JupyterLab is an early preview only. We're not suggesting that you download JupyterLab to start using it in your daily work. It's not at that point yet. The visual design, the UI, the UX, the interactions, the code are all changing very rapidly. If you want to download it and start to play with it to give us feedback, we would very much appreciate that though. The phases that we're going to go through in the coming months and years, we're really at phase 1 right now, where there's going to be a series of JupyterLab releases of sort of alpha and beta quality that will be an alternate UI alongside the classic notebook. JupyterLab 1.0, we will release that when JupyterLab basically has feature parity with the classic notebook. Beyond that, JupyterLab will eventually become the default user interface for Jupyter, and the classic notebook will be available will still be available and shipped. Eventually, in phase 4, we'll stop shipping the classic notebook by default, but it will always be available. One thing that's nice about this is that the notebook server is basically unchanged, and so you can run either front end with the same notebook server. At this point, I'm going to give the stage over to Jason Grout for some live demos.
See it yet? Oh, you can see it. Great. Okay, so when you launch JupyterLab, this is what you see. There's a number of components to JupyterLab. We'll take a quick walkthrough as a user, and then take a quick walkthrough of some of the capabilities that this provides for developers, and then conclude. So what we basically see is three main areas if you count a right-hand side tab here. Right-hand side sidebar. We have the basic components that you find in the Jupyter Notebook now, as well as some other ones that are coming or here already. So over on the left-hand side, we have a file browser. It supports the typical things that you would want to do in a file browser, including dragging and dropping files into other directories to move. Right-click opens up a shortcut menu where you can rename, duplicate, cut, copy, paste, etc. You can click to rename a file, etc. You can browse directories. So here I'm going into a directory, and then there's breadcrumbs to navigate. So the things that you would typically expect in a file browser. Over on the main area of JupyterLab, we have what we call the dock panel. So this is an area for you to arrange windows for your notebook and for text editors and the various components. So for example, let's open up my outline here. And when you arrange, we don't just have tabs. We allow you to configure your workspace however you want. So for example, if I want to have my main area still fairly open for other stuff, I can just drag this tag over to the side, and now my talk is over here. We have splitters. We can arrange things in a number of different ways. So for example, there's a number of components that are provided in JupyterLab already. For example, we have notebooks. So here's the very famous LIGO notebook. So this is the detection of the LIGO event that happened recently. We can open up Python files. So we have a code editor. You can arrange them, split them vertical and horizontally here, and drag your splitters however you want to arrange your workspace however you want. We have a number of other components as well. We can open up, let's see, files, terminals. So from the menu, we can open up a new terminal. And it's a full terminal. We can put that off to the side as well. So maybe put this down here so I have my notebook and my terminal next to each other. We have consoles. So this is essentially what used to be the Qt console, but in a web front end now. So new Python 3 console, so it asks you for the kernel. And so here's a full console. So an interactive shell to IPython. We also have a list in the sidebar of all the running notebooks and terminals. And we have some of the features that you really, a lot of people have come to love in different IDEs out there now. Command palette that provides access to just about any of the functionality in the JupyterLab. So Command-Shift-P is often done in applications. And then I've got fuzzy searching. So here's a new terminal right here. And this command palette has, you can see if I pull off the fuzzy searching, groups of commands and plenty of commands for all sorts of actions that you can take on things inside your environment. We also have a help menu that provides some help references. So for example, here's the IPython help reference over in the sidebar. We also have a short about page about JupyterLab here, so accessible from the menu. So like Brian said, we have a number of components that sort of make up this computational ecosystem, and this brings them all together in one IDE, lets you arrange them however you want and integrate them in many, many ways. So that's a short user tour of what JupyterLab is. If you installed it and looked at it, you'd be able to start working with it. But that's only the tip of the iceberg for the capabilities that the JupyterLab platform allows us to take advantage of. Just like, as we're starting to see now, the Jupyter Notebook, as popular as it is just the tip of the iceberg for the platform of the protocols and messaging system, messaging specs that the Jupyter project is defining. So from the perspective of a developer, JupyterLab allows extensive customization and a performant application platform. So it's built on top of Phosphor.js, which is a library that provides a rich set of tools and data structures and UI elements and things like that for building performant desktop-like applications on the web. It's extensively unit tested. It's just about to release 1.0. It has optional strong typing for those people that like strong typing and like the compiler to catch your errors using TypeScript. So it's all written in JavaScript. And we'll see, it's a brainchild of Chris Colbert. Somewhere he's in the audience. Well, it's brainchild of Chris Colbert at Continuum Analytics. What it does is it provides an extensible and performant application platform. And then JupyterLab is a collection of components that sit inside this platform to provide an application. So it's completely extensible. And to give you an example of how extensible it is, this entire application with all these different parts is this is the entire application. So there's a lot of little boilerplate code in here, but what I want you to recognize is Here is the notebook component. It's a single plugin that is enabled in the application environment with a single line. So we start up the JupyterLab application, and this is the list of components that are provided in the application. Each one is no better than the other. Each one is a first-class citizen. And each third-party component that you write extends the same platform in the same way as the built-in components. So this allows you to take the JupyterLab application and treat it as a platform that you can mix and match in any way that you would like. So there's a notebook. Here's the plugin that provides all the terminal functionality. Here's a plugin that provides all the help functionality. Apparently OS X likes to look up words. And et cetera. So this emphasizes this is a pluggable, extensible platform, and it's built that way because we expect and encourage people to extend it for their own uses. Plugins can add a number of things to the environment. You can see these menus and things like that, and commands. These aren't hard-coded in the application. Each plugin can add whatever commands they want to the command palette. They can add whatever menu items they want to the top-level menu. They can add the About plugin, for example, adds this widget that you can open up. So the plugins are able to extend the environment in a number of different ways. And one of the things that we built into this is an extensible, pluggable system for rendering documents. So for example, my talk here is a Markdown file. But you might say, well, I'd like to see that Markdown file as a rendered HTML. So there's a number of plugins that provide renderers for the Markdown files, and one of them, which incidentally was written by a person that had no experience with JupyterLab and very little experience with JavaScript, Ryan Grout, yesterday in just a couple of hours, and it's a couple dozen lines of code and provides a rendering of Markdown files. And what's better is you render the Markdown files, and of course we can put things side by side, and these are completely live models here. So this is about to become my favorite editor here. So what we have is a pluggable system for rendering files, and they're completely live and communicate with each other. But this opens up a huge number of doors for fluently and extensively working with your data. So for example, there's a data set that's pretty common, this iris data set. And if you wanted to look at the iris data set, a lot of people would have to open a notebook and type in, pandas read.cvs, and there's my data set. I mean, the alternative is you could open up the CSV and, try to parse it by hand. But having pluggable renderers means I can just open it up with a table renderer, and there's a slight bug right now where you have to open with first, but you can open up with table renderer and see your file just like this. And you don't have to open up command, you don't have to open notebook, et cetera. You can just see the file the way it is. Suppose, for example, as another example, that it's a nice day outside. There's a lot of parks in Austin. I didn't realize this, but there's a huge river running through town. There's a lot of parks. It's a beautiful area. What's the closest park? Well, one way you could do it is, as a data geek, instead of walking outside, we'd download the GeoJSON file for the parks. And we'd open it up and parse the GeoJSON file, and there's our data right here. Yeah, so let's just make sense of it. Oh, there's a longitude and latitude. Great. What's the closest park? So this is like working with data files. Often it's very hard to get a quick sense for the data file. But of course, since this is a pluggable environment, it might be easier to instead open up the GeoJSON file with a map. And now, it's much easier to look at your data, right? So this is a couple of dozen lines of code I wrote in a sleep-deprived state at 7 a.m. this morning. Easy to extend this environment, and we get to take advantage of tons of JavaScript libraries out there for working with data files and working with various files. And I mean, this is completely live, et cetera. I don't know where the nearest park is, but it's very easy to find it now. Let's go back to our talk. One of the things we brought this extensible plugin system for not just rendering files, but also for rendering outputs in notebooks. So we've designed a system building on top of, inspired by some of the systems that have been designed for other notebook front ends, to be able to take any output in a notebook and render it using a plugin. So you can specify how an output is rendered. And one of the things we did with this is we rewrote the widget system and the IPython widget system to use this. So now IPython widgets are just outputs, just like everything else. And you see some of the capabilities of this by an example from the old notebook. So here's an example from the old notebook. It's kind of a complicated example. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make two areas, a left area and a right area. The left area will have two sliders. The top slider will be numbers. The bottom slider, the maximum of the bottom slider will be the value of the top slider. And then on the other side, I want the product of the two numbers. Pretty simple UI. This should work. In the left area, I'm going to create an interact. And inside that interact, I'm going to create another interact where the top value of the inner interact is the value of the outer interact. And then inside the inner interact, now that I know the two values from the two sliders, I'm going to print the product. And at the top, I want this print title, product calculator, and then there's my left and the right boxes. So if I do this in the old notebook, all of a sudden you realize there's problems. One, since widgets are in a completely separate area, their own special thing, they come before all outputs, so now my title's at the bottom. It's a caption instead of a title. And the sliders are great and everything, but because there's an inner interact inside the outer interact, it keeps making new sliders every time I change the maximum value. And you notice my caption now disappeared because the way interact works is it deletes all the output. So this is sort of a messed up system. It worked well for a long time, but it always gave us some pain points like this. Well, so what we did was we realized this pluggable idea is really nice. We should write widgets as just another type of output that's rendered to outputs. And so that's what we did. And so now what we have is something that looks like this. And again, this is alpha level, so there's still some UI issues, but we have the title, and just another output is these widgets. And the outputs work just like you think. The bottom value, the top maximum bottom value is equal to the value of the top value, and there's my product over to the right-hand side. Much easier to use widgets in connection with the outputs. Much, much easier, and much easier to extend the platform to render outputs using whatever cool JavaScript, fancy, interactive, whatever things that you want. And one line to include it in Jupyter Lab. So we're really, really excited about this. And we're even more excited than actually this platform that we're building. We're more excited about what you guys are going to do with it. We expect there to be an explosion of third-party plugins providing all sorts of new capabilities. Start up a cluster in a new tab. And monitor a DAS calculation. Be able to view all sorts of different resources. Be able to interact with all sorts of JavaScript APIs and databases, et cetera, all within the same environment. First-class citizens with everything else in the environment. So what next? So this is alpha. I'm really glad today that we didn't demonstrate it was alpha. We're just telling you it's alpha. There's rapid iteration, major changes. It may break. It may cut you because you're living on the bleeding edge. But you can install it. It's a Jupyter Server extension. Pip install Jupyter Lab installs like from a week ago, which is severely out of date at this point, but we'll keep updating it. You have to enable the server extension, or you can just conda install it, which enables the server extension by itself, and then it adds a new command, and so instead of Jupyter Notebook, you type Jupyter Lab. We highly encourage contributions. So one way to contribute is to sign up for the user testing that the Cal Poly students are doing. There's sprints on Saturday and Sunday. Several of the Jupyter Lab developers will be here Saturday morning, for example, in order to help people that want to get on board and see how to start writing these 35 lines of code to make a new plugin. There's regular Jupyter Lab progress meetings on Fridays. People are welcome to join. You can follow the repo on GitHub. And we'd like to express special thanks to Bloomberg Continuum and the Jupyter team. This is a collaboration over the last 2 years of Bloomberg Continuum and the Jupyter team. I'd like to call out especially, if they could stand up, Chris Colbert, and Steve Sylvester and Ashton Darian and Dave Wilmer's not here. These guys wrote most of the code in JupyterLab. And I'd like to thank Bloomberg, Continuum, and the Morris Sloan and Helmsley Foundations that made it possible for a number of us to spend most of our days working on JupyterLab and the underlying technologies. And I'd like to thank you for, one, being an audience, but two, for your future contributions to the platform. Thank you very much.
What sort of timeline do you guys have in mind for
I knew somebody was going to ask
alpha,
that.
beta?
I've been telling
phases?
everybody, well, you know, I don't know if we want to publicly commit to anything.
I don't think we
Alpha is released today. I'm thinking next SciPy might be a good time for a 1.0 release. I don't know.
Well, I mean, part of the thing to keep in mind is when we release 1.0, our expectation is that you should be able to open it and be able to transition from the existing notebook with 0 problems. So it really needs to be a complete feature parity replacement at that point. Obviously, between now and then, it's not going to be a step function. It's not going to happen instantly. It's going to be a very gradual progression towards that point. But it's going to take time.
Yeah.
What are your current major roadblocks?
Our current major roadblocks. What would you say?
So I guess from my perspective, there's a lot of extremely subtle interactions that the notebook supports. A great example of this is the command and edit mode of the existing notebook. And it's really subtle. The way we manage focus in the browser page, so clicking in a cell will automatically enter edit mode. Clicking out of it enters command mode. You need to be careful about explicit focuses because it can cause the page to jump. Getting the keyboard driven interactions working well. It's an order of magnitude more complex because now you have multiple panels, so you need to figure out how to route keyboard shortcuts to the given panels. Obviously, a lot of it's working, but there's a ton of edge cases that we're still really polishing, and the only way you solve those issues is just using it a lot. And so there's going to be a very long period of user testing, and obviously, you know, over time, we're starting to use JupyterLab more and more, and our hope is that users will as well.
Do you have any kind of automated reporting and gathering of problems? So in other words, if we are early adopters and we get these funky things, is there a good way to be able to document them, or automatic crash reporting or anything like that?
Yeah, we don't have automatic bug tracking, but we encourage people to file GitHub issues, and we encourage a PR for an automatic bug tracking system. Thanks.
I was wondering, do you have a first vision on how you're going to do debugging in JupyterLab?
We have done some experiments and some like very rough experiments, but we would like there to be debugging eventually in JupyterLab. We were talking with some people from various places that have built debuggers for Python the other day, and that's squarely in sights for what we'd like to have happen.
So we have time for one more question, and after that we need the first lightning talk to start prepping. Who's that, Anthony?
First one is Harsh.
First lightning talk is Harsh Gupta.
Just to be clear, the little context menu, the 30 lines of code, we're talking about 30 lines of JavaScript, right?
Yeah, all the code that we're talking about is JavaScript code. TypeScript, really, if you want to use the strongly typed stuff. Before we move on, there was one other group that I wanted to especially acknowledge, and that is if the Cal Poly students could stand up. These guys... These guys have made the contribution rate to JupyterLab exponentially grow over the last month. It's been really amazing, and they're doing a lot of the user testing and things like that. We really appreciate their help and jumping in.
Okay, great. Let's give another hand.